threats from climate change, rising sea level, and rising energy consumption. These are the big issues I think that we face going forward. The impacts on people are already occurring if you live in these areas. In 1983, this was a glacier in here. It's now a lake. We were surprised in 2006 that this lake had drained. And if you go around this ridge, the backside, you can see the water is actually flowing underneath the ice cap going to the valley in the south. In the North Valley, there's no longer any water, and the alpaca moss has dried up, and they no longer, the local people can't graze their alpaca in this particular valley. There's also geologic hazards forming. This lake, which didn't start until 1991, is now a geologic hazard. And this is a meadow here, usually alpaca are grazing in there. In March of 2006, an avalanche came off of here, fell in the lake, created a mini tsunami that flooded down through the valley and killed the alpaca that were grazing in that area. So the local Quechua Indians that live in this area are already being impacted, and of course they're living right on the cusp of existence anyway in these parts of the world. So here's one of my favorite quotes. There are 3 stages to any scientific discovery. First, people deny that it's true, and they deny that it's important, and they don't credit the wrong person. And the interesting thing about this was actually a quote from Alexander von Humboldt 150 years ago. So human nature has not really changed that much. So the question is, can nature change an inconvenient mind? And I'm assuming that we have an inconvenient mind in this case. Well, here's some data from Munich Re, which is one of the largest insurance companies in the world. These are major events, natural disasters in the United States. And they go everything from volcanic to earthquakes, that's the red you see down here on the bottom, to meteorological storm, to hydrological floods, which are in blue. And then there's climatological, which is temperature extremes, droughts, wildfires. And you see how this curve is increasing. And so this brings us immediate consequences outweigh delayed consequences. So the question is, are we getting into where there are immediate consequences due to the climate change that's taking place on the planet? And if you go forward in time to 2011, we had a huge number of extremes. This is a blizzard that shut down Chicago in February of 2011. We had a number of these F5 tornadoes. This one is in Alabama. This is in Joplin, Missouri. You hear about these in the news. And then if you look at the number of weather fatalities in 2011, there are 1,070. If you look at the 10-year average, that's double the 10-year average. And if you look at the 30-year average, it's 4 times the 30-year average. So if you're an insurance company, you're concerned about these type of data. And of course, it's not just us. This is fires over in Russia in 2011. There were floods in Pakistan. And in fact, in 2011, the overall losses, weather-related, were $148 billion, of which 55 billion were insured. And that means the governments and taxpayers and people, individuals picked up that difference. So there's a cost to climate change. We come into 2012, and here's ice on a canal over in Venice, quite unusual. The droughts that started in Texas in 2011 extended, became worse in 2012. And in fact, by July, we had over 60% of the U.S. in moderate to extreme drought. And that's the most that's been recorded since this former drought index was invented, but it's only 12 years old. So it doesn't give you the time perspective that you can get from other sources. And of course, on top of that, we had temperature extremes. This is the departures from normal for March of this year. These are 8 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. And you can see all the eastern U.S. In fact, there's a town here, Winter, South Dakota, where temperatures reach 94 degrees Fahrenheit 2 days before the end of winter. extreme events. So there were 15,000 warm temperature records broken in that month of March alone. And around the world, floods, fires, and you heard a lot about the fires, the Lago Canyon fire. And this brings another human response, that consequences for the individual outweigh the consequences for others. And so if it's your house that's burning down, you become concerned about these things. And in fact, there was a Yale poll that came out just last week. 3/4 of Americans now believe these extreme events are related to global warming. So the opinion is changing. In July of this year, we had 97%, 4 days, in which 97% of the Greenland ice cap was melting. And we can look at ice cores and say, well, maybe we had a similar event maybe back in 1889, because we look at ice layers in the forest. They're very rare. And of course, you've all heard about how we've lost the sea ice this year. And this actually shows the extent, greater than 15% in white here compared to the average. And then we can also look at the sea ice concentrations. And this is where it becomes really serious, because it's not just the area. The sea ice is thinning from the top, or from the bottom up in this case. And we have submarine data from Cold War starting in the 1950s, and we compare it to today's values, and we've lost about 1.75 meters of sea ice thickness over that time. And it means it's more susceptible as you go forward. So this is the satellite images. This is our historical records that come from national shipping records. And then last year, a Canadian group and I looked at proxy records. 52 ice cores, 11 tree rings, 4 lake cores, 4 ocean cores from the Arctic Ocean to try and put the recent changes into a longer term perspective. This goes back 1,440 years. This would say it's really unusual what's happening, at least in that time frame. And here's another interesting projection. This is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. 13 models projected this is how sea ice should decrease going forward in time. This is what is actually happening, much faster than the models predict. And part of this is because they didn't take into account when the sea ice melts, there's lakes that form on the surface. That absorbs radiation, speeds up the process. So this is evolutionary theory, and it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. I mean, that's what evolutionary theory would tell us. So the question is, as individuals, groups, nations, in contrast to evolution, we can understand our circumstances and deliberately make the appropriate changes and policies in order to improve the outcome. And we should be able to do that. So there's a kind of a perfect storm brewing here, as I see it. The ingredients are the fact that we have CO2 that has over 1,000-year lifetime in the atmosphere. We have a climate system that has an inertia. We will not see the impacts of the day's greenhouse gases for 20 to 30 years, because it takes a long time to warm up oceans, and ice sheets, and the like. We have these positive amplifying effects. We move the sea ice, which reflects 85% of the incoming radiation. You replace it with ocean water, it only reflects 7%. So you increase the temperatures, you get these positive feedback. And then we have this fossil fuel addiction locally. An alternative is that in a brighter future would be cost-free fuels, clean air and water, economic development, good jobs. In this country today, 80,000 people work in coal mines, but over 100,000 people now work in solar energy and solar power. So the change is taking place. It's slow, it's subtle. So I think that as society, there are really 3 options we have here. One is prevention, which means taking measures to reduce the pace and the magnitude of the change in global climate that are caused by human activities. They would include reducing emissions of greenhouse gases, enhancing the sinks. If we can take it out of the atmosphere, that's good. And we could talk about geoengineering. How can we engineer the planet? There are people who think about these things. Risky though. Then there's the adaptation, which means taking measures to reduce the adverse impacts on human well-being that result from the climate changes that are occurring. And I think we're in the adaptation mode. We look forward already. Examples include changing agricultural practices, crops that you grow, strengthening defenses against climate-related diseases, building more dams and dikes. But this is a moving target, and our models are not very good when it comes down to regional and local impacts. And then suffering, the adverse impacts that are not avoided by either mitigation or adaptation. And I think if you look at what our options are, that pretty much sums them up. And it's up to us to choose which ones. So there are changes taking place, and with conservation, increased efficiency, there are a lot more four-cylinder cars, hybrids out there. You can see these changes taking place. We have renewable energies, everything from fuel cells, zero-emission coal-burning power plants are possible, technologically at least. Solar, geothermal, across the way here, we are putting in geothermal wells here at the university. Ethanol, wind power. There's mass transit, light rail, buses. These changes are taking place in some cities more than others. Housing design towards more compact cities, so you don't have to drive as much. Nanotechnology, LED technology, these are all advances that are being made. And then you can look at things that actually individuals can do and actually save money. Buying organic foods, avoiding heavy packaging, eating less meat, reducing the number of miles that you drive, carpool, keep your car tuned up, keep tires properly inflated, choose fuel-efficient vehicles, and try car sharing. If 3 or 4 families have one car, fly less, and these are all things that we can do. But what is very clear, it is not going to be shoppers that are going to change the future. The future will be changed up here by citizens. I think we hold the key to what that future will be. And the big idea here would be we have to develop a new economy that is not based on consumerism. It has to be based on sustainability. And it will take everybody working together to solve this problem. The problem is too big for individuals, groups, or political parties. This is a huge undertaking. So this time around, I think it requires a public awakening. Now, whether nature will do that for us, you can argue, but that public awakening will also establish the political will to bring about change. And resetting priorities, sacrifice for the future. I think there probably will be some. And then there has to be an alliance between the governments and businesses and citizens for all of this to work. Otherwise, it just won't. So our greatest challenges in the 21st century will be learning how to get along with each other. We've been on that a long time, and you can question how good we are doing at that. But the other one is learning how to get along with our planet. And these two challenges deal with human behavior, and they're very closely related as we look at our future. So I'd like to close with this view of the Earth. If you've learned anything from our international space programs, it's how unusual this planet is to support the life as we know it. And when we talk about global climate change, it's very clear that nature is the timekeeper on this. And unfortunately, none of us can actually see the clock that we're dealing with. How much time do we have? But we do know that the clock is ticking. And so with that, I'd like to close and open up to questions.